I the jerk for leaving without explanation after my mother-in-law pretended not to hear me? I, a 32-year-old female, have a 7-month-old daughter with my husband, a 34-year-old male. My country ensures a long maternity leave for up to 2 years. However, I am self-employed and cannot afford to lose my clients, so I try to work while my daughter is sleeping and during the weekends. Lately she has been teething, so I am operating on little to no sleep. I have an issue with my mother-in-law. She does what she wants despite people asking her not to, and then says oops or denies doing it. It was annoying before the baby, but after she was born, it has become insufferable. My husband talked to her and set boundaries, so she stopped doing that when my husband is present, but she was still doing it when it's only me in the room. We agreed she could not visit when my husband is not at home, and my husband is not to leave me alone with her. Because of these boundaries, we did not see them for 1.5 months. They live 2 hours away, and we did not find a mutually good time. They finally came over last Sunday. 20 minutes into the visit, my father-in-law wanted to see a lawnmower that had broken down, so my husband went into the backyard with him, leaving me, the baby, and my mother-in-law inside. She was drinking coffee and eating cake. She sat next to my daughter on her playmat and tried to feed her some of her cake. I immediately told her no, she couldn't have that. My mother-in-law pretended not to hear me and proceeded to put her spoon to my daughter's closed mouth. I repeated to stop doing that because she couldn't have cake yet and definitely not from her spoon. Still, she pretended not to hear me. I repeated it again, but still nothing, and now there was cake on my baby's face and she was fussing. I grabbed my daughter and went to my husband and father-in-law, subtly gesturing to my husband to come back inside. After about 5 minutes, my mother-in-law decided to go outside too and was approaching me and the baby. I gestured to my husband again, and he made an annoyed face. I had no energy to deal with any of this, so I stood up, went inside, grabbed the baby bag and car keys, and went to the car without saying a word. My mother-in-law asked me where I was going, and I ignored her. I drove to my sister's, which is about a 15-minute drive. There were some missed calls from my husband, so I texted him where we were and that we would be back in the evening. It was time for my daughter's nap, and she fell asleep breastfeeding, so my sister told me to go sleep too. After she woke up and had her milk, my sister took her and told me to go back to sleep. I slept for about 3 hours in total, and my phone was on silent, so my husband's calls were ignored, and apparently, his parents left disappointed, and my mother-in-law cried. My husband is furious I did this. We are still fighting about it. He can't believe I was so rude and took the baby away when his parents came to see her after such a long time. He is angry I couldn't have waited a few minutes so that he could finish talking about the lawnmower. I told him I am too exhausted to deal with this. He left me alone with my mother-in-law despite our agreement, be it only 10 minutes, so I left. Am I the asshole? In my opinion, you have done nothing wrong here. Your mother-in-law should respect your boundaries, especially when it's about your baby, and your husband should have your back on that. It must be uncomfortable for him to see his mother upset, but he should talk to her instead of making you the bad person. The only thing that might have helped is if you picked your daughter up after the first time your mother-in-law didn't listen, though it shouldn't be necessary. It's important to stand up for your boundaries, and your husband should support you on that. Am I the jerk for going to a birthday party after my parents' spouse's funeral? My dad's wife died 2 weeks ago. I am a 15-year-old male and did not like her, so her death did not really make me grieve. I felt bad for my dad and my half-siblings, but she is not someone I will personally miss. My dad always knew we had a very rocky relationship. He used to ask me to give her a chance because she did not always say the right things, but she was a good person deep down. Her not saying the right things included saying homophobic things while claiming she was not homophobic, and saying racist things while asserting she was not racist. She called my mom a slut because my mom met my stepdad when I was only a newborn. They did not start dating until I was 4, but the fact that she met the guy she would later marry apparently made her a slut. Also, not marrying my dad for me made her a slut too. She told me she did not like my relationship with my mom because it left no room for her. She would complain when I would not hug her and would try to accuse my mom of giving me issues by not taking care of me when I was a baby. It was not true, but that was her way of trying to blame my mom for me not being affectionate with her. She got sick 2 years ago, and my dad begged me to try getting along with her better. I told him the best I could offer was biting my tongue and walking away from her more. 3 months ago, she was given the all clear, and then she was dead. The cancer had returned, and she died before they realized. My dad and half-siblings were really upset. I had to be there for them, but I felt like Dad expected me to be upset and to grieve like they were. He would tell me to cry and open up about how much I missed her. He asked me questions when planning the funeral and would dismiss my "I don't know what she'd want" and tell me of course I knew, but I did not. I never paid attention to stuff she liked. The funeral came during my mom's parenting time. One of my best friend's birthday party was the same day, and I wanted to go. My mom said of course, and after the funeral, which I went to, I attended the party. My dad was furious when he found out about it because of social media. He asked me how I could be happy and cheerful and celebrate something when I lost someone we all loved. I had to really hold back that I did not love her, and I did not lose anyone because I really did not. My dad also raged at my mom. She told him I was a kid and deserved to have a good time. He asked how I could be so heartless and told me I could have stayed with him and my half-siblings and helped take care of them instead of going off to celebrate. But instead, I went to a party to celebrate on the worst day of our lives. Am I the asshole? In my opinion, you have done nothing wrong here. You did the right thing by supporting your family at the funeral, and it's not up to your dad to dictate how you should grieve. Even if you did feel some sadness, you still have the right to decide how you want to spend your time afterward. Your dad needs to respect your feelings and stop trying to force his way of mourning onto you. Am I the jerk for taking my child into the changing room? My 37-year-old female self has a son who does swimming lessons after school. He is 4 years old and struggles to get dressed on his own after swimming. The swimming pool is not set up for families. There is a changing room with a girl's side and a boy's side attached to the pool. There is also a family changing room that is not attached to the pool and would require walking through the school to get to it. The family changing room is also the adult's toilet. There is not much space in there, and it is not uncommon for it to be in use. The first couple of weeks I tried using the family changing room. We ended up waiting, then having to change in a recently used, not very clean toilet stall. With tired kids, it was just a nightmare. I have been sending both boys, 6 years old male and 4 years old male, into the boys' changing room to get their swim stuff on. The 4-year-old can mostly do that himself, but he is just not quite there with getting dry and dressed on his own yet. So after swimming, I take him to the girls' changing room so I can help him. Usually we end up being the last ones to go in, but today the boys were hungry, and we went in pretty quickly. I was in a corner, getting my kid changed, when another mother started yelling at me. She wanted me to be in the boys' changing room with my son, as my son was making her daughter uncomfortable. We were doing a quick change. He was not running around naked. I was between him and the rest of the changing room. Her daughter was more uncomfortable with her mother yelling than my son's presence. The 6-year-old girl asked her mother to stop several times. I did not respond to her much because I am not super confrontational. I just focused on getting him changed and letting him know he was okay. She started yelling louder that she didn't consent for her daughter to see that. I got annoyed at this point and said, "She doesn't have to look." I know this did not help, but I was getting frustrated. After that, I mostly did not engage as she kept berating me and my son. I just got him dressed and out as quickly as possible. I am now second-guessing myself. I do not understand why it would be better for an adult to be in the wrong gender changing room than a prepubescent child. That is what she wanted. If I had been a father with a daughter, she would have been apoplectic. If she had spoken to me calmly and politely, I would have engaged with her, but her reaction felt over the top, especially in front of the kids, so I did not try to reason with her. During her yelling, she said that I should just go in the boys' changing room with my son like the nannies do. So maybe I am totally in the wrong here. I never noticed that they do that, as I do not pay much attention to what others are doing when I am with my kids. My expectation is that until kids can be on their own and sort themselves, they go with their adult. So, am I the asshole for having taken my son into the girls' changing room? It's unreasonable to expect a 4-year-old to go alone into a changing room. Moms bring their young children in all the time. It sounds like that other mom needs to teach her daughter not to look at other people when they are changing. Also, it's worth mentioning to the pool management that there's a need for changing stalls or better access to a family bathroom. Am I the jerk for telling my parent that I don't want to care for their kids? Am I the jerk for not wanting to care for my siblings? I am a 20-year-old female and have a sister who is a 16-year-old female, as well as 2 half-siblings from our mother's new marriage. A 3-year-old male and an infant sister. My mom insists on my help with the youngest siblings constantly and without notice. She wants me to babysit, feed them, or give them baths. Most of the time it's fine, but sometimes it's overboard. For context, I have autism, specifically high-functioning Asperger's. Today she asked me to give them baths, which I did. It was hard because of my sensory issues and the fact they were both screaming bloody murder in my ear over wanting my mom to give them baths instead. I pushed through, got them dressed through the screaming, and then I left them in the living room with her and started to go back to my room. She asked if I could hold the baby a little longer. I did, but she was still screaming and crying, so it was hard. The only time she'd calm down was if my mom held her, and she didn't want to because she was getting ready to leave for an AA meeting. At this point, I was extremely overstimulated. I was standing sort of rigid but still holding the baby acceptably, I thought. She began to yell at me, saying I wasn't holding her with the right body language, and if I held her like I cared about her, she wouldn't cry. I told her she's probably crying because she wants to be held by her mom due to separation anxiety. No matter how much I coddled her before, she still cried. This has been a consistent issue since my sister started going to daycare. Maybe I am a bit rigid after being screamed at, but I don't feel like my body language was the issue. My mom eventually got fed up and told me to put her in the feeding chair, so I did and started to walk back to my room. She then started to rant about how she still needs my help with watching them longer and how I don't care about my brother and sister. She said she shouldn't have to ask for help. It didn't occur to me that it was assumed I should stick around and watch them because their father is home. All she asked was that I give them a bath and hold the baby, which I did. This escalated into an argument in which I told her that her children aren't my responsibility, especially not at 20 years old. While I don't have a problem helping out sometimes, I'm not her employee and both can't because of autism, and won't because I wouldn't want to if I could predict what she wants from me in order to wait on her hand and foot. I do live at home for free, so maybe it is entitled of me to be so averse to helping her with them. I do other things. I'm the only one in the house who cleanse regularly, every other day. And that's easy for me as it doesn't involve any crazy variables and never changes. But I do not want to help with my siblings as much as she wants. You are not in the wrong here. Their dad needs to step up and help out instead of assuming you'll always be there. If your ASD is formally diagnosed, you might qualify for some disability resources, which can provide funding and housing options. Checking with your local aging and disability resource center could be a good start. Am I the jerk for telling my newfound father and his wife that I'm not going to take part in their religion ever? I met my father in September of last year. I am a 16-year-old male, and I was 15 at the time. I had recently lost my mom to cervical cancer and had found out that my grandparents and 2 of my aunts did not want to keep taking care of me. Instead of letting me go to my aunt out of state, they contacted the man who wanted nothing to do with me before and involved a social worker, so I would need to go to him instead of the aunt I actually knew and who did want me. Because a social worker was involved, she made the effort to put me with my biological father over my aunt. I pleaded with her to let me live with my aunt, and my aunt pleaded for this as well, but we were denied. I was told a biological parent will always get custody over an aunt or uncle who has no legal rights to the child, especially when my original guardians, my grandparents, sent me to my father instead. In October, 3.5 weeks after I met him for the first time, I moved to another state to live with my father and his family. My father has admitted he knew about me but was disgusted and embarrassed by his promiscuous ways in the past and for having premarital sex. He decided to start over. He said his wife was thankfully very open-minded and was happy for me to live with them and have a relationship with them despite my origins, which have nothing to do with me. My father and his wife are very religious. I am not. I was raised by an atheist mom, had a mostly atheist family, and I have no interest in joining or taking part in anything religious. This is a serious point of contention with my father and his family, who try to take me to church and set it up so I will join their church and get baptized. I have refused. I have also said I want to live with my aunt, but that gets denied. I do talk to her via direct messages and video calls, but it's not the same. She did try to petition for custody, but the different states added complications, especially when a social worker is still actively involved. Things got way more tense recently because 2 of my father's other children were questioning me on why I don't pray. I told them I didn't believe. They tried to get me involved with their church activities, and I said no. They got upset and tried to do all this converting stuff, and they are only middle schoolers for heaven's sake. My father tried telling me I shouldn't shoot it down so quickly and to give it a try, and I said no. Then his wife decided to have her say. She told me I should be grateful for a chance to be saved, and that I am being very stubborn and should show them respect as my parents and let them guide me into religion. I told her they are not my parents. They are random people I am forced to live with, and I will never take part in their religion ever. They need to accept that because I don't believe in God or anything. They didn't like my closed-mindedness and were angry I spoke to them with such finality. Am I the asshole? Nothing you have done here makes me think you are the jerk. You have handled this like an adult. Continue petitioning the social workers and court system to live with your preferred relatives during these next 2 years. The fact that your biological father wants you to live with him now, after having nothing to do with you for 15-16 years, is pretty telling. One has to wonder if his motives are financially driven, especially considering you should be receiving benefits after your mother's passing. Am I the jerk for telling my stepmother she's embarrassing herself? My father and my stepmother have been together for a little over a decade. I'll call her Nikki. She didn't move in with him until years after I had moved out, so I've never been close with her. I don't actually call her stepmother. To be honest, Nikki annoys me. She is childish and naive in ways that often feel forced. She'll speak in a high-pitched voice and replace random words with the baby version of them, like boo-boo and wee-wee. I'm always nice to her, of course, but I don't like being around her for long. I didn't dislike her at first, but when my children, a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl, were born, Nikki's antics almost immediately went up to 11. Whenever she's around them, she acts either younger or the same age as them. I can never tell whether she's trying to get their attention or my father's, but it's gotten to the point that my husband and I try to minimize contact between her and our children. My daughter's 3rd birthday party took place about a week ago, and both my father and Nikki came. At one point, I noticed that rather than take a seat at the tables like the other adults, Nikki was walking around talking to the kids. It was odd, but no one seemed bothered, so I didn't do anything about it. Half an hour later, my 5-year-old goddaughter came up to me and asked why there was a lady talking like a baby. She told me she was scary and that she didn't want to play with the other kids while she was around. I went up to Nikki and suggested that she sit down. I explained that the kids wanted to play by themselves and that having an adult around like that would bother them. She seemed fine with it. Sometime later, my daughter ran to me crying. She said Nikki wasn't letting her play with her friends. My husband and I pulled Nikki aside. From what I gathered, the girls were trying to play princesses and she was trying to dictate who everyone should be. We told Nikki once again to take a seat and leave the kids alone. She tried to argue with us, saying she was only trying to make sure they were having fun. I replied, "They aren't. You're not a child, they don't want to play with you. I know you mean well, but you're embarrassing yourself, so please sit down and stop bothering them." She stood there for a few seconds before she took a seat next to my father. The party continued without issue. I later found out that at least 3 of the other kids had also complained to their parents, but they didn't tell me. One of them figured Nikki was an entertainer I'd hired. A couple of days later, my father called and told me off for how I'd treated his wife. He says that Nikki is heartbroken and that I was extremely rude when she just wanted to play with the kids. I reminded him that the children didn't want to be around her, but he's still insisting I apologize. My husband told me that someone had to do something, as the kids were upset. I feel like this is a dumb issue, but I can't help but feel like I might have acted rudely. Am I the asshole? You did nothing wrong here. You were too kind and patient. Even a 5-year-old saw right through Nikki's ridiculous act. There's no reason to feel bad about an infantile idiot getting upset with you. Tell your dad he has a spouse problem and he should work on that without bothering you. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.